So as we start to kind of wrap up the book of Proverbs, the last few lessons here, we've got 3 lessons kind of in a row that are all going to talk about different relationships. So today we're going to talk about friendships. Next week, husbands and wives. The following week, Ryan's actually going to cover for me, talking about the parent-child relationship. So as I was thinking about kind of there's a ton of kind of commonalities between all these kind of different relationships. And then last week, I was going for a walk and I was kind of like listening to a podcast or kind of a speech. A speech, it was a guy who, he's right now getting his PhD. He's a little bit younger than me. But he's in the aerospace industry in Huntsville, Alabama. He's giving a speech to a bunch of aerospace executives, so people that are much higher in education and influence and importance than he is. But he's in the room with a bunch of just kind of NASA and contractors. They're all working on a project called Artemis. Artemis is the project to how we're going to get humans back to the moon. So there's a lot of really smart people, and I think the biggest thing is they had a ton of influence, right? There are people with political connections, with contractor connections, and all these things. If you've ever been to Huntsville, the whole world is kind of revolves around the aerospace industry, and there's just contractors after contractors. And you talk to people, there's just engineers around every corner. You talk to these people, like they only work kind of 3 to 4 years at most at any given one place, and because there's always like, what's the next contract? What's the next project I'm working on? So these are the kind of people that he was talking to. So with a lot of really smart people with a lot of influence. The one topic, though, he brought up was feedback. The ability to provide feedback to people that maybe are over you or working with you. And the interesting aspect of feedback he brought up was that we've kind of lost the ability as a society to provide negative feedback, to say, this might not work. The people he was talking to live in the world of politics. Those politics lead to contracts, so dollars, right? The ability to keep yourself employed. And so one of the things he brought up, so again, is a bunch of engineers. So he brought up this picture. Anybody know what that is? Lena? Is Lena in here? Jesse? It's a PID control loop. So this is how processes, so in engineering and kind of process control world, these are how you control systems. One important aspect, if you kind of see that loop that kind of goes all the way back to that summation thing and kind of works its way around and around and around, is the feedback loop. So what this happens is you're trying to run something and you're wanting to run something at a certain pounds per minute. And this loop says, okay, run the pump at 50%. And it ramps up to 50%. And there's a flow meter that says, hey, you only got up to 10 pounds a minute. So it's like, all right, motor goes faster. Or it goes too faster, then it overshoots. And it comes back. It finally finds its right spot. But, so this is kind of a graph there. It has both positive and negative feedback. So if you go over, it says slow down. If you go under, it says speed up. However, if you didn't have that feedback loop, that pump would just keep speeding up. If it never told, the flow meter never told the system how fast it's going, it just speed up until the pump just blew apart. Feedback is crucial to any system. Well, this is math and science and engineering. But we think about feedback from people and relationships. If we only have positive feedback for one another, will our system be in control? Will we find the right equilibrium? I would say probably not. And we look at these relationships and we think about, are we comfortable with both giving negative feedback to others, but even more important, am I comfortable with receiving negative feedback? I think too often it's easy to remain silent on both sides of that equation. So today, especially as we look at the relationship of friendship, I want to think about just like this, right? If we don't have this equilibrium of both positive feedback and negative feedback, we won't be in balance. We won't have the right checks and balances to be in control. So I want to take a look about some of the significance of faithful friendship. So turn in your Bibles to Proverbs chapter 27. We're going to spend quite a bit of time in 27 with a number of different verses. Proverbs chapter 27, we're going to begin in verse number 5. Better is open rebuke than hidden love. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy. The first area I want to talk about is friendship, and the relationship that we see here with friendship works to refine us. Proverbs emphasizes that a faithful friend is willing to provide constructive criticism even though it may hurt momentarily. Real friends care enough to correct us, to help us grow, rather than remain silent and just see us kind of heading in the wrong way. Why do you think the Solomon calls this kind of honesty faithful wounds?
It's gonna hurt, but it's for our own good. It's like if someone's got some giant mole that's probably malignant growing on their arm, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna ignore it. You know, like if you're the surgeon, you just keep ignoring it because you don't want to cut it off because it will hurt a little bit. It'll be worse in the long run versus just cutting it right now. Just a little bit of pain to prevent a lot more pain down the road.
We see the contrast there that Solomon says is this contrast between the wounds of a friend, and it says in the profuse kisses of an enemy. We see him saying, hey, this insincere praise that your enemy may give you may feel good in the moment, right? But is that helping you grow and develop and change and correct any kind of pathway that you're on? So how do we respond to those faithful wounds? How do we learn how to respond from that? It's not always comfortable, just like a surgeon, right? It's not going to be comfortable. You get something that needs cut off. I think one way not to respond is, I thought you were my friend. That's really an easy one. Sometimes it's like they just kind of come and hit you square between the eyes. Like, I thought you were my friend. I think the answer is yes, I am your friend. And that's why I'm bringing this up to you. I think it's interesting that this idea of refinement that Solomon is talking about is what true friendship is really all about. Turn over to Proverbs we'll go to chapter 27 and verse 9. Oil and perfume make the heart glad, and the sweetness of a friend comes from his earnest counsel. We think about kind of in ancient times, hosts, and I think this is something that is a little bit lost on us. Hosts, people traveling in from different places, and they provide a place to stay, but they also provide places to clean up and get refreshed and things like that. And some of it is this oil and perfume that they would give you after a long journey, and you come into them, and how much better that would make you feel, right? If you're going on a super long journey, you're riding a camel for days or weeks or whatever, and all of a sudden you get to a place, you're able to clean up, and you put on this oil and perfume, and think how much refreshed you would be. But then Solomon says, this counsel that you receive is almost as better than this refreshment that you get from getting all cleaned up. So how do we think about counsel and earnest counsel? How does that make and enhance the quality of our relationships?
Well, when you think about the perfume and the ointment, I mean, that just covers the stench a lot of times. Whereas, to counsel, if you just think of the word counsel, that involves time. And it's not just you throwing out a statement, or just like a one-liner or something that just takes like a minute to say, but there's interaction between you and someone else. And so, friends are willing to do that for each other, to invest that time and to take that time and to sort things out and to have that back and forth that most of the time is necessary for the feedback to even be effective.
How does receiving counsel from friends help grow and enhance that relationship? Jess?
I think it's a system of building trust. You need to, if you're going to go to someone and say, hey, I think you need to work on this, you need to be willing to listen to them say, hey, thanks for that. I think you need to work on this. And so you're going to build that deeper relationship each time you do something with that, and that not having yes men in your corner all the time. And if you have that relationship of just having the yes men all the time, you're essentially building a house of cards. One little thing is going to tumble the whole of it, as opposed to if you've got a solid foundation, maybe you'll have to repair a little bit, but it's not destroying the whole of your existence, essentially.
Yeah, I think both of these, both refining it and seeking counsel, really, I mean, again, they point out the flaws that we have. And sometimes it's really easy to work it all out in your own head. And it makes a whole lot of sense in our own head, but it doesn't make sense to the rest.
Think about the word counsel, and I think of camp, and then I think about sacrifice and foregoing one thing for something better. I think that's like when you have a really good friendship where there's counsel and refinement. Both friends are like being able to forego the you're good, I'm good comfort zone and stick their neck out for your soul,
Yeah.
perhaps, and tell you things or share things with you that they see in you that you might not see in yourself.
Yeah.
And that is so scary to sacrifice the comfort of a friendship for someone's soul. And if you've ever done it, it's not pleasant, and it's so worth it at the same time. I will just say there's sacrifice involved.
Right. I think Phil Robertson, when he was here in March or April, in one of his lessons, he talked about surrounding yourself with godly people. He called it your board of directors, right? And I think that seeking out counsel from others, I think it becomes not just your peers, right? It's your peers are a great source of counsel, but who are those other people that maybe have experienced different things and have gone down different pathways? How much greater can they say, hey, oh, watch out for this. I think, and yielding to that, I think, is the hardest part. I think it's changing our direction and changing our plan, perhaps, and understanding that a faithful friend, the right group of people that you surround yourself with, we all have the same mission. We all have the same mission is to get to heaven, to serve Jesus as our King, and to surround ourselves with godly people that can both refine us and give us counsel is going to make that journey so much better, so much easier.
I just want to say too, you need to make sure whoever is giving you counsel, that they are a good friend, and they do have your best intentions.
Absolutely.
And aren't going to be easily strayed the wrong way.
Yeah. Thank you.
One of the things that I'm testing right now in this class, I don't think I've thought this through yet, but in 27:6, faithful are the wounds of a friend. And then in verse 9, the sweetness of a friend comes from counsel. The question is he a friend because he gives me the good feedback? Or do I place my high value on the friend who does give me that good feedback? And I'm going with the second one because I get a lot of feedback. And the people who have built up capital in my life, who have pumped a lot of love in, I take those words to heart a lot. And so it's like, here is the friend who tells me the truth.
Right.
Rather than the person who's never said more than hi or bye to me, who now has some kind of criticism. That's not the counsel of a friend. It's the counsel of a passerby. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
That's
no.
I'm going to be watching for that as you read through your passages to see which one it is.
No, I think that gets to Lynn's point too. I think the counsel is something that it's not something that you take the first time you met them, like, all right, I'm going to chart my path for life based on what you just gave me.
Yeah.
There's a relationship that needs to be built up over time. And I think it's a give and take. Both the positive and negative feedback. I mean, the first go around of the negative feedback, I'm like, whoa, I don't know if I like this. It's interesting as you think about our children kind of growing up, and I don't want to steal too much from a lesson in a couple weeks, but that's almost the environment you need to help them to understand the praise aspect and the punishment aspect of what they do and how they do it. At a very early age, it doesn't really probably sink in. And all of a sudden, I do this thing wrong and I get my hands slapped. But as they grow older and older, the why behind the punishment, the feedback, that negative feedback becomes so much more important to explain and talk through. And my guess is it doesn't happen the first time you talk to them about it. Same thing with friends. The negative feedback is painful. And sometimes it's like, all right, thanks, but I just need to go away for a little bit. But if we really let that soak in and understand where are they coming from and where is that happening, it really kind of gets us into the next kind of aspect of friendship. Proverbs 27:17 says, iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. I put up there accountability, a source of accountability, but how does this metaphor of iron sharpening iron illustrate this aspect of accountability in a friendship relationship?
It goes both ways, it's reciprocal, both are getting sharpened.
What happens when you sharpen something like on a grinding wheel?
Sparks fly.
Sparks. material is lost. But in that loss of material and the sparks and the fire and the heat that is caused by that, you get a refined edge that can now work better. That's another thing that's not super comfortable, is thinking of somebody that can come into our lives, provide us a source of accountability, but knows when to kind of sharpen us a little harder than we realize we need to be sharpened. I think having friends who are going to challenge us when we need challenge, encourage us when we need encouraged, is a great way where we can grow both personally, but even more so spiritually. I think as we think about these three aspects of refinement and counsel and accountability, it's truly the growth and the insight that we need in relationships of friends. We need to be able to both get spoken to about our faults and speak to others about their faults. We need to understand when we're running with the wrong crowd, and we need to kind of straighten ourselves up and get ourselves right. Jess?
I think as hard as it is to maybe take the correction or whatever, a true friend is going to see both the bad and the good. And so they're not always going to be coming at you with all your negatives. They're going to see the good as you go along too. And they're going to be there and ready to praise potentially when things are going really well, or you've taken the time to, you've heeded their counsel and you're making those corrections and you're doing what you need to do. And so that friend is there to continue to help you and encourage you on that journey of being of a positive as well, not just the negative.
Yeah. I think the encouragement is the balance is key.
I think we're really easy to say that a friend who does all those things to you is not kind or not loving because it hurts and it's uncomfortable and it's not how you want to spend your time with them. But we never hold that standard to Jesus either. I mean, we very easily say that he's all loving and all kind, yet his rebukes are brutal and pretty constant. And there's total counsel and total refinement in his relationships with the disciples and with the crowds and with all of Israel. But yet we would never say that that takes away his loving nature. And so we see the duality in Christ, but we're so easy to strip out only one title to a friend.
Sure. Stuart?
And just to add just a little bit to what everyone's already said, but I just want to pile on and say the reason that we are counseled is because someone sees potential in us to make that change. Your friends would not counsel you if they did not believe that you had the ability to change. So we have to be receptive to that. And so that's the piece. Otherwise, it's just wind blowing, right? You're falling on deaf ears. You've heard that. So it's just all of this counsel from friends. They come to you because they see the potential in you to do and be better. It's not just a critique. So I think we need, as receivers of that, to understand that piece of it as well, right? So I think we have to be willing to change.
Absolutely. Proverbs chapter 17 and verse 17 talks about the constant nature of what a friend is. It says a friend loves at all time, and a brother is born for adversity. True friends are constant through good times and through bad. And I think the one thing that this one also makes me think about is where are true friendships ultimately built? It is through shared adversity that a lot of times strong relationships are forged and established and made stronger and stronger. Ryan likes Band of Brothers. I really like Band of Brothers. But I think you think about how that team together, right? They had a commanding officer that was just a total jerk, making them run up and down the hill for no good reason. They didn't get to do anything fun. All the rest of the camp goes off into town. They had to keep working. So much so that they were like, I can't even work for this guy. But what that did, that adversity forged them into a significantly tighter band of brothers. How does that then look like in our lives today as we think about the challenges that we face? Are we trying to stand out there and just, I've got it, and hold ourselves up? Or are we looking for people around us that we can lock arms with, to stand up to both the good times, it's easy, fun, right? Woohoo! But also the bad times. I think those are some things as we think about what true friendship is. It is the constant. They're there on the great days and on the bad days. They're willing to step in, to hold you up, to take the brunt of something for you. As Ryan talked about Jesus, this is definitely the image of Jesus in this, where Jesus being our perfect Lamb of God, taking on what we should have endured. How can we emulate that in our lives as friends and be able to take on those things for others? Proverbs chapter 27.
How do we allow this to happen? We have to allow ourselves to be in relationships with people and be involved with people and let them inside our lives. We can't just portray an image of ourselves on Facebook or Instagram that everybody sees. We need to see who we are and be involved in each other's lives. And when you have relationships with people that are real, when a problem arises or counsel is given, it means a lot more coming from someone who's been there with you.
Yeah, definitely. The last aspect I want to talk about what friends are is they're valuable. Proverbs 27 verse 10 says, "Do not forsake your friend and your father's friend. Do not go to your brother's house in the day of your calamity. Better is a neighbor who is near than a brother who is far away." Faithful friends are worth keeping. No matter what the cost, no matter what's going on, faithful friends, those who are there, right? Those who are there in the day of calamity, he says, better is a neighbor than a brother who is far away, right? The people that are there, that are with you and your faithful friend group, it's worth keeping. And I think those things we need to do, the second half of the lesson this morning is, okay, how do I build this up? How do I look to grow and strengthen my friendship with others? What can I do? And I think the first one is, how can I be a faithful friend? It's about loyalty. Again, Proverbs 17:7, it says, "A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity." Proverbs 17 and verse 9, "Whoever covers an offense seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates close friends." Proverbs 16 and verse 28, "A dishonest man spreads strife, and a whisperer separates close friends." being loyal, avoiding gossip. Friendship thrives on forgiveness, understanding, and love. Turn over to 1 Corinthians chapter 13. This idea of a friend loving at all times, I think it can be a challenge if we don't have the right perspective. We don't have the right aspect of what love truly is. Here in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, beginning in verse 4, we see this picture of a definition of what love is. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. You think of that in the context of a friendship relationship, right? Patient and kind. We don't always get our own way, and we don't always respond the right way to critiques. But the true friend is loving, and they will be patient with us. We're not envious or boasting and things like that really start to kind of break apart the bonds. And ultimately there in verse 7, right, it's that constant bearing all things, believing all things, hoping all things, enduring all things.
With the conversation about critiques, I think our mindset should be verse 6. Someone who does not rejoice in wrongdoing but rejoices in truth. That's correction. That's someone who sees a flaw, right, in this conversation, typically a spiritual flaw, and our immediate response should not be, yay, that's a good thing for your life. No, it should be, this needs to be addressed because I, as your friend, I value truth more than your wrongdoing. I'm not going to rejoice in that. I'm going to rejoice in the truth. And if we can believe that our friends have that attitude, then maybe the correction is a little easier.
I think that the aspect of too, where in Proverbs there it says, he who repeats a matter separates close friends, or in a whisper separates close friends, right? This isn't like, hey, did you hear about that? It's going straight to the person and saying, hey, I saw this. There's an issue. I've got to figure this out. Let's work on this together. This is what true friends are built upon. Providing honest counsel. I think this is something that as we look to build our friendships and relationships, not only do we need to be able to receive honest counsel, but we need to be able to give honest counsel, just as a friend there in Proverbs 27 provides the sweetness of that friendship in a relationship. As we talked about it though, how can we ensure that our advice is both truthful and loving? It doesn't have to be, loving does not equal rah-rah good news every time, right? Some of those things are going to be critiques, but it's our attitude and our approach and the why we are bringing it forward to them. This concept of negative feedback doesn't start with day one, because what Ryan was talking about, there needs to be some relationship capital built up over time to truly say what is valued in this relationship is not that we always get along and we're always in a great mood. There needs to be some aspect of providing that honest and truthful counsel, but doing it in a way that's both constructive and edifying and provides growth to the person that's receiving it. Being reliable. Proverbs 25 and verse 19, trusting in an unreliable man in a time of trouble is like a bad tooth or a foot that slips. Trust and growth and honesty are all great. But reliability, right? Are you there just when things are going well? Or are you there regardless of what's going on in the situation? I think being reliable, being this source of strength in time of need, being the person that's able to be there, even when the person might not even realize that they need somebody to be there with them. I think that's the aspect of true friendship, is being able to be in a relationship with somebody else that you can sense the time of need. And I think in many cases it does not need to be some grandiose, I did all this stuff. Sometimes it's just going and sitting across the table, providing a hug, being there, just to have the presence. Being humble. Proverbs 13 and verse 10 says, by insolence comes nothing but strife, but with those who take advice is wisdom. We can get all stirred up if we're arrogant, if we're nosy, if we're really kind of getting in everybody's face. We're just going to stir the pot. This verse talks about being humble and taking down that aspect of strife. And those who are able to kind of take advice is one who is seeking after wisdom. I think the last one this morning is looking at the quality of friendship over the quantity of friendship. Proverbs 18, verse 24 says, a man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. I think we need to prioritize the depth of our relationships versus having these large circles of friends. It's great to have a lot of group of friends, but what are we doing to look at ourselves and having the strong depth of relationship and making sure that that's truly what will drive us forward? Tim?
I had that verse highlighted in my Bible because my friend Jim, we've been best friends for 57 years now. And when I was in Vietnam, Jim came over to my house and sat with my mom and my family almost every single night for almost 2.5 months. And to have that type of friend who does that because he is a friend is so meaningful and so important. And when I came home, I wanted Jim to pick me up at the airport because he's the first person that I wanted to see because of that friendship. That endures to this day, just as strong.
I think the source of strength, the constant nature, right? The willingness to extend ourselves, the depth of relationship that can be built through those things. So as we think about relationships, we think about kind of going back to that negative feedback, positive feedback. We need the balance. We need to find the right balance in our own lives and in our relationships with others. Am I able to work on that? Am I able to build this relationship up by being loyal, to be able to provide counsel? As we think about them, do we surround ourselves with godly people that can challenge us and strengthen our relationship with God. Let's go ahead as we kind of start to end here this morning. Turn over to Hebrews chapter 10. I think ultimately what is needed in a friendship or relationship is sometimes are they stirring you up, right? That's what this verse talks about. Are they pushing you to be more spiritual in nature? So Hebrews 10, beginning in verse 23, let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promises faithful. And let us consider how to stir one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together as the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. How do I stir one another up to love and good works if I don't have a strong relationship with them? How do I stir, challenge, and encourage somebody spiritually if we're just acquaintances that we see 3 times a week? I think as we think about what it means to be a true friend, is someone that's willing to refine us, to give us the right counsel, hold us accountable. I think then the value of that, right, the constant and the nature of the growth that will provide to us. I think what we need to think is not just seeking out who's going to do that for me, but how am I doing that to those around me? As we think about the nature of this relationship, I think it's interesting how Solomon, who was a king and right had all the power, and everyone would come before him in reverence and things like that. But it's interesting how he talks about friendships, the choiceful nature of that, not by rule or decree, but the choiceful nature of what friendship relationship can be and how strong that can be and the value that it provides us. Morgan?
Going along with the value it provides us, work has been brought up a few times in this class, and I think this becomes much simpler and clearer when we realize we're at war together. And we're all on the same battlefield, and it's all for the same goal. And I think that makes friendship so much more real and relevant, you know.
Sure. Any other thoughts this morning as we're finishing up? Thank you so much for your time this morning.